Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel, and this video is going to be all about my 2018 Read the Classics Challenge final thoughts and tips and everything that I can think of that's going to be in this video, so stay tuned. We're going to start off with each month I have made a list of what I've read in this past year. It's also now a new playlist. It's going to be called like the 2018 book reads playlist, something to that effect, and I'm going to leave it linked down below for you. When I began this year, I don't even remember where I saw it, but it was the Read the Classics Challenge, or Back to the Classics Challenge, and I was like, this is perfect, I'm going to do this. And I made the list according to kind of like what fits the prompts, and we went with it. Now, one of the things that I love about this challenge is that there are 12 prompts or challenges or whatever you want to call them, and so that works out to be like one book a month. The difficulty is some of the books were kind of thicker, and so it would take me a little bit longer, and then some of them were just a little bit easier reads, and I could breeze through them and pick up another one. Today is December 31st, and we got down to the deadline, so let me go back and kind of recap what the challenges were for this year and what I chose to read. There's also another video that I did at the beginning of this year. I will leave it linked down below. I don't remember to link above, so it's just going to be linked down below. And so let's kind of recap. So the 12 challenges for the 2018 Back to the Classics Challenge was a 19th century classic, a 20th century classic, a classic by a woman author, a children's classic, a classic crime story, a classic in translation, I knew I missed one, a classic travel or narrative, a classic with a single word title, a classic with a color in the title, a classic by an author new to you, a classic that scares you, and number 12, reread a favorite classic. So for the 19th century classic, I chose Uncle Tom's Cabin. It was better than I expected. It was a little bit difficult to read. I think that ended up, no, I did manage to get it done in a month. And just when you're going back into the classics, after reading much of contemporary wording and all kinds of things, it is a little bit difficult to make that transition. And that is what I found with this book. Like, if I could go back and do things over again, I probably would have tried to, like, for my first time, I feel a little bit more matured now. But if I could go back and do 2018 again, I probably would have scheduled out myself to be like going back in time, not past to present, but from the other spectrum, like going from 1950s back to the 1850s. So that was again, just a little bit challenging to me, only because you don't have the breaks like what you have today. You don't have quotations and filling. It's all kind of mingled in, and the quotation marks aren't always there. And so that, again, was a little bit of a challenge. Insofar as Uncle Tom's Cabin, like, I have done reviews on those for my Goodreads account, which is linked down below. Thank you for breaking. We had a pizza delivery person showed up, and I'm like, we don't order pizza. That was weird, but I wish they would have given it to us. Anyway, so Uncle Tom's Cabin was a lot better than I expected. It wasn't what I thought. I didn't think it was as great as it's hyped up to be, or what it's thought to be. I thought it had a different perspective than what most people put on it. Alright, the second book, which was a 20th century classic, I did To Kill a Mockingbird by Lee Harper or Harper Lee. I don't remember. Anyway, I gave it 4 stars. I think I was kind of torn between 3 and 4. But the more I was thinking about it and talking about it with people, I ended up giving it 4 stars. I know that it's like a 5-star favorite for so many people, but it wasn't me. Like, it's told from Scout's perspective, and again, it's that first person narrative. It always, I think, drops a star for me automatically. Just because I have to really think about, this is your perspective, like what is really happening. And in a certain extent, I do that in my day-to-day life. I'm just like, well, this is what I'm thinking. What is that other person feeling or doing? And like my thoughts on the subject kind of get suppressed because I want to know what the other side is. For the most part. I mean, I'm not perfect, but that's kind of always what's in my head of what I want it to look like. And I think I kind of do that to a certain extent within my books. With To Kill a Mockingbird, everybody talks about like the black and white racial prejudices within that. I found that book actually dealt with many prejudices. It went through rich and poor, black and white, like really scholastic, brilliant, and like the, I don't like to call them dumb, but like the lower scholastic spectrum, and prejudices against what is known and what is not known, and boy and girl, like there was a lot. That book was just jam-packed full of prejudices that Scout was just seeing from everybody's point of view. So number 3 was a classic by a woman author. I did Baroness Orcsey's The Scarlet Pimpernel. I don't know if I'm saying her name right, but I always said Orcsey. The Scarlet Pimpernel. That one was 5 stars. I enjoyed that so much. It was told more. I had seen the movies in past years, and I really, really liked them. Like, they're probably one of my favorites. I've actually been wanting to see them again recently, but I can't see them like on Amazon Prime or anything, and I can't do DVDs, so I can't see them right now, which is very sad. I really liked how the A&E, I think it is, how they did the Scarlet Pimpernel. I'm butchering this, I'm sorry. Scarlet Pimpernel is basically this time for the British and the French during the French Revolution. And kind of how the spies and the aristocracy and things like that. And it's all told from the wife's perspective of the Scarlet Pimpernel. I can't remember her name. And it's kind of told from her perspective. And it was kind of very Jane Austen in that. I don't remember it being I, me, my first person, but it was through this lady's perspective, kind of how Jane Austen does it. Like, she doesn't put men in a private situation. She, the author, will inject. Okay, I'm not even going to try to do this anymore. I am not an English professor. Okay, but I really, really liked Scarlet Pimpernel. That one just was fun. It was a fun read. And it had information and historical facts in there that wasn't so heavy that it was really difficult to get through. So, really liked that one. 4, which was a classic in translation, I did Enrique Maria Fromm's All Is Quiet on the Western Front, and that one brings me to my next tip for going to reading. This is a soldier's perspective of World War I. He's 18, schoolboy, just getting in, trying to do what is right for his country. And golly, the lines in this book are just heart-wrenching, to the point that I kept trying to reread it to just really soak so much in that I wasn't getting very far. And I ended up being in that book at least 3 or 4 months. I actually don't have a finish date on that, which is kind of unfortunate. But I was in that book 3 or 4 months, and I just was like, you know what, I'm just going to get the audiobook. And I did, and I got the audiobook, and it was done really well. Whoever did the audio was phenomenal. And I listened to it as I was house cleaning, and of course, like, these tears are just streaking everywhere as I'm cleaning, and I'm like, it's just the ammonia, it's just the bleach. It really wasn't, like, but that book, I think, really for a long time. And I kept thinking of my boys and just some of the stuff that, some of the decisions they would have to make as soldiers. Like, and we always see stuff so black and white. Like the Germans, and so black and white for us Americans with that. But reading that was just heart-wrenching. And it definitely gives you some perspectives on democracy and dictatorship and a lot of these things that I wish more of us were aware of today. So that one, I think, really kind of, that one changed me. There's just a few books that I will say that with. That one changed me, and I gave it 5 stars. A children's classic, which is number 5, I ended up reading Caddy Woodlawn, and I loved it. We had it as a family read aloud, and we all loved it. I gave that 5 stars, and I just fell in love with Caddy. I know I had done it as a kid, but I really do not remember it at all. I remember my cover of that Caddy Woodlawn. I just don't remember reading it. And so it is very much like a Laura Ingalls Wilder or a Little House book, but probably a little bit more what Laura could have been like if Pa had had free reign, kind of thing. And it was fun. It was a very fun book. Definitely more of what I thought my family would be more like with that. So then number 6 was a classic crime story, and I did Lord Peter Wimsey by Dorothy Sayers. The book that I had was not complete, which is very unfortunate, but it was really enjoyable. I did like Lord Peter, but I only gave it 3 stars basically because I didn't get things in succession, and nowhere in the book, unless you start reading the introduction or the epilogue, or you know, it isn't until you start reading like the fine notes within the book that you realize this is not complete, and that's actually unfortunate. There's nothing on the back cover. There's nothing on the first couple of pages. You actually have to start reading the story. And so that was unfortunate to me, just because it says like the Lord Peter Wimsey Mysteries or something like that. Or Lord, I don't remember. So because it wasn't in succession, I felt like sometimes I was missing some information. And I mean, they're just like Sherlock Holmes novels, like, or whatever, like Sherlock Holmes books that you would get. They were just short stories released into papers that people would get periodically. The thing about Lord Peter is that he actually really not only had a male audience that really, really enjoyed him, and a female audience that really, really enjoyed him. Like, people were, Dorothy Sayers made a character that both people were talking about. And this is 1920s, so the whole classes were still being discussed and talked about. And so there's a lot of that within the stories, but not so much in your face, kind of like The Great Gatsby is. And so I really, really appreciate that. And of course, I love mysteries. And that's something that kind of irritated me, and like I applaud Dorothy Sayers about, is that sometimes she would throw a loop that I was like, I feel like you just threw that loop just so that we couldn't figure it out. And that might have just been me trying to rush through this. I don't know, because it was towards the end of November trying to get this. But or because I didn't have the succession. So that was where I was really struggling with, was that one. Okay, so number 7 was a classic travel or narrative. I chose Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. This one, again, when I started reading it with Phineas Fogg, I was like, I need a dictionary to read this. And I was reading most of these at night just before I went to sleep. And this is where another tip comes in. When I'm about ready to go to sleep, the last thing I want to do is to have to pull out a dictionary or my phone to look up words and to understand meanings. And sometimes you can figure them out just by the context of the section. It wasn't always in this case. And so I ended up not doing this one before bed. I ended up doing it at another point in my day. And once I got in, it literally took off and I did not want to put the book down. There's some things about it I have to say that, like, the movies really, a couple of movies really portray that we did end up seeing afterwards. And I was like, I don't remember this in the book, but both movies in different time periods brought it up. And so, it was just unfortunate that it didn't stick with me as long as I wanted it to. So that was probably the only thing that really frustrated me about Around the World in 80 Days. But I was like, this is a phenomenal geography, living history book to do with the kids. I think it would be a much better one read aloud rather than given to them to read. So there's my 2 cents on that. But again, really great book. I really enjoyed it. Number 8 is a classic with a single word title. I'm actually going to skip this and come back to it later on, kind of leave you hanging. I will say I had chosen Persuasion by Jane Austen to do that, but I'm going to hold off on that, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. Number 9 was a classic with a color in the title, and I did The Black Arrow by Robert Louis Stevenson, and I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars, which still means I liked it, but I didn't find it as a 4 or 5 star because I felt like I was just reading another twist on Robin Hood. And that's not bad. The thing is that if given the choice between reading Robin Hood or The Black Arrow, it's kind of like saying, okay, I could read someone's version of Pride and Prejudice, or I could read Pride and Prejudice. I'm going to read Pride and Prejudice. And I kind of felt the same way between The Black Arrow and Robin Hood. The Black Arrow has a young man whose father's name is kind of big, like he was somebody really great, and his murder, this Black Arrow is trying to avenge. And the boy, Dick, who thinks it's the Black Arrow is like, no, it's the uncle that you are kind of looking up towards. There's a lot of Richards in here, so you've got Dick, and you've got Richard, and you've got this other dude, and you're just trying to remember all these names. There's a woman that comes in that he thinks is a servant, and he treats, her not so great, and it turns out to be a girl. And I'm like, there's your maid Marian. I mean, there was just a lot of things that were very similar to Robin Hood. Again, I did enjoy the book. It just didn't make the 4 or 5 stars because I would prefer to read Robin Hood instead if given the choice. Okay, number 10 was a classic by an author new to you. I did Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, which is like the #1 book for most classic enthusiasts. I gave Jane Eyre 3 stars, no tomatoes please, and to the point where I'm still just like this book has not been far from my thoughts since finishing it, and I finished it Thanksgiving weekend, I believe, or a little bit before. It has not been far from my thoughts since then because I keep going back because I keep thinking it's a book that I really, really like. Jane Eyre, in of herself, is a character that I would like. I just wanted a different setting for her. There's this mental wall that I'm like, I can't get past Mr. Rochester. He is not. There's qualities in characters that you can forgive, and again, I have discussions and I have thoughts and I struggle with myself, and I keep going back to, I know I'm okay to dislike him, but I don't want a prejudice to knowing what the story was to kind of influence whether or not I was going to like the story based on its merit alone. I hope that makes sense. Basically, I knew the outline of Jane Eyre before I began reading it. And when I started reading it and kind of getting more of a deeper understanding of it, like just some of the stuff that Jane would say, just, yeah, I still am not completely, it's not that I'm okay with it, that's not the word, but like how she she almost worships Rochester to the point where you know what? I did a review on this with all of my struggles. It's going to be leave link down below. Just go check it out there. Mainly because I hear my husband home, which means all the kids are going to come here in about 2.5 seconds. Okay, so Jane Eyre I'm still struggling with, and I'm going to read her in 2020 again because I need a little bit of time for me with Jane. Okay, number 11, a classic that scares you. I did The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, which was like the first horror story. No, it's not the first, but it's like a horror story. I did not like it. It's very insightful. It has some really good points. I gave it 3 stars because of that. It's probably more like a 2.5.
Hey, Mommy.
Like, in the end, it's not, there's nothing beautiful about the plot. But it's got some really thought-provoking stuff in there. So, actually, I was surprised by how few people knew what The Picture of Dorian Gray is about. So, let me kind of recap it a little bit. The Picture of Dorian Gray is basically about your Great Gatsby dude. What is his name? Nick? But in The Picture of Dorian Gray, you've got basically a pretty boy. And there's an artist. And the artist decides that he wants to paint this pretty boy's picture as narcissism.
Mommy, I'm gonna say.
Okay. And so narcissism is basically the guy that looks at his own face in the water. It's a Greek mythology. He looks at his face in the water, falls in love with himself because he's so beautiful. And this artist is basically painting a rendition of that. And he uses this guy, Dorian, to portray that art. And so then you've got this other dude that starts coming into it because the artist is talking with his friend, which is kind of like what I would call your modern psychologist. Basically, he has all these modern ideas and thoughts and things like that. And he's talking to him about how beautiful he is, and he's like, I want to paint the picture. So now you've got Dorian Gray, the pretty boy, you've got the artist, and you've got this philosopher. And so Dorian Gray's portrait for who he is getting painted, and this philosopher is basically starting to fill this young man's head with these ideas. And there's some really good lines in that book, basically about how young people are always swayed away by philosophical words. Even Charlotte Mason had some really good stuff that worked along with that as I was reading this. So he's starting to listen to this philosophical guy who's basically starting to, wouldn't it be nice if we could hold on to time by the portraits we paint? He makes some remark like that. And Dorian Gray basically sells his soul to the devil. And I think it's kind of like Oscar Wilde's twist on this idea. Basically, Dorian Gray is like, I wish I could always remain young and beautiful, and this portrait is the one that grows old and disfigured. And he gets his wish. But the twist on that is the selling the soul to the devil. Every evil thing that Dorian Gray becomes, the portrait basically portrays it. And so he hides his portrait away because it's starting to show what kind of a true man he is inside himself. And because of that portrait, he actually becomes a more evil person, or more evil version of himself. And like I said, like, the idea is good. It's awful. It's disgusting. So I probably will never read it again unless I can get like I'm going to be looking online actually, just trying to get some of my favorite quotes from that, and I'm just going to leave the rest of the book alone because, like, there's nothing beautiful about the book. There's nothing that makes me want to read it again because I know the ending. So, yeah, that book did scare me. I saw the black and white movie with a young Angela Lansbury years ago, and that one, like, terrified me. What? Gave me nightmares for days. Picture of Dorian Gray. So, and then number 12 was reread a classic. You will see. So I'll have a little bit more talking conversation about Mansfield Park, but it is reread a favorite classic. Of all the Jane Austen novels, Mansfield Park has been my favorite, and this year is one that I wanted to reread it again. Fanny is probably my favorite character. When I started rereading Mansfield Park, I already know the synopsis. I knew everything. I had read it in high school. I think what happened was, as a teen, I projected what I knew of the movie, and because the version that I had seen followed very closely to the book, I just read it like I was watching a movie. As someone older and wiser, I hope, I got to see more of the flaws within the characters that I so much idolized. So Edmund's probably one of my least favorite Jane Austen characters. And that was kind of like a really big disappointment to me in reading it. But Fanny has still remained probably the most beloved character in my heart. Like, if I could be any character, it would be Fanny Price. I would probably want to change her name, though. But other than that, she's still my favorite. So I still ended up giving this 5 stars because it's my favorite. And then I'm going to go back to number 8, which was a classic with a single word title. I had chosen Persuasion. However, I only finished this a few days ago, and I still have to read Persuasion before the end of the year, and I knew that wasn't going to happen. But I decided to put Persuasion aside because I have a project that is making me very happy, and I can't wait to share it from our home to yours. So you're just going to have to wait. So I ended up putting Persuasion aside, and let me just say, trying to find a one-word title that's a classic was a little challenge. I ended up picking Thomas More's Utopia up and got 1 page into it and realized this is not something I can read in a few days. So I ended up kind of fudging a little bit on this, and I did Charles Dickens' The Chimes. And then some people say the should be included and some people don't. I'm doing Charles Dickens' The Chimes, which is basically his ghost New Year story. In Victorian times, telling ghost stories around Christmas was actually very popular, and that's kind of how Christmas Carol came about. So, to see the end review of that, you're going to have to wait a few days. But that's what I ended up doing for my one-word, or a classic with a single word title. So I put Jane Austen on hold, and I did that one instead. So there you go. There is the review of all the classics I've done with Eyre, including the tips that I gave you to help you get through some of those classics, especially if they're a little bit more difficult. This is a follow-up video into the one that I made yesterday, which basically is sharing with you the classics that I will be reading this year. And I have some in there that I will be implementing my own tips for you in. So like the audio books and not reading before bed and making them more time, and reading things maybe from 1950s back rather than all that. And you don't have to read the challenges. You don't have to read them in order that they're listed, 1 through 12. Those are just the challenges. So, all these tips, I'm hoping they'll help you create a more enriching classic read. And again, like I was saying, with Jane Austen, sometimes it's easier to watch the movies and kind of understand what's going on, because when you get into the vocabulary and how Jane writes, it's easier to follow and kind of get more of a good grasp on all that, especially some of those conversations that they have. So thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and leave me a thumbs up if this was helpful for you. Go ahead and subscribe if you are new, and welcome to all of my new subscribers. But until next time, have another cup of coffee and read another chapter.